Hi, I am Hafiz, and this is We Are That's Two, a podcast for fathers by fathers. Each week, we will have conversations about different aspects of fathering. We will also maybe speaking with experts to get their opinions. However, today I have only my partner and me, and we will share with you about a topic close to our hearts, which is how do you teach values to our kids, right? And because teaching values is best done by creating a family culture. So these are big terms: values, culture. Let's unpack them today. So, Paksan,
Yes, Hafiz.
all yours. Yes.
All mine, really. Yeah. Well, let me first ask you, Hafiz, what values do you have for your family? What were some of the values that you passed on to your kids and were trying to teach your kids? Can you give us some examples?
Or the one value that I think daily we always have in mind with our kids is discipline. All right, to be able to have order and be able to do things. All right, such that they are able to achieve what they want. And don't slack, don't be lazy, but I think this is just one of the values. There are many others that we have in our family. Yeah.
Well, how did you go about teaching your children, to have this value and to make it part of their daily life?
Yeah, it's a challenge actually to do that. It's relatively easier when my children were younger. As they go older, things change. It's not just telling them; it's showing them and doing ourselves. And don't give up. Sometimes by telling is not really effective, and by doing sometimes also we feel not very effective. How come we do, they don't do? But you need to be patient. I think that's what I
Yeah,
think I learned, and to be
definitely.
consistent. Yeah, yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. So it's a daily thing. It's something you have to, keep putting it in the kind of the front burner instead of the back burner, and keep reminding it. And like you say, you yourself have to be doing it, so that everybody watches, everybody sees it, and understands that this is real, this is important, and this is something that he wants all of us to be doing. Yeah. So today what I want to share is that teaching values is best done by creating a family culture. All right, by creating a culture for the family. That's the best way if you want to teach any values. All right. And well, first of all, let's talk about culture. And I think culture is simply a way that a group of people think, feel, make judgments, and also act. All right, in order to achieve a common goal. All right. So every country has its own culture. Every race and ethnic group has its own culture, and even companies, want to have their own corporate culture, for example. So culture is something everybody understands, but setting it up, creating it, it may not be as easy. It's easier said than done. So likewise, every family has its own culture. All right, it's the way parents bond with their children, impart values to them. Okay, but you see, culture can be created one of two ways. It can be created by design, or it can be created by default. By default simply means you don't do anything and just let things happen as by nature. And what it tends to happen is that usually it doesn't turn out the way you want to. So it's best that if you want to create a family culture, you need to be very intentional. You need to be, with a clear mind about what the goal is and how you want the outcome to actually look like, and then work towards it. Okay, so you cannot just leave it, by chance, because things will usually not turn out the way you want it. And
So,
culture
so
is something that
wait,
doesn't happen
Patson,
overnight.
I want to throw something.
Yep.
into this conversation. All
Yep.
right. We only have at most 50% of the time we have our children. The rest of the time, they are outside, influenced by other people, by friends, by school, by what they watch, the media, and you say that we can design it. However, how do you ensure that this is can be done in a effective way?
Well, you see, in when that's why it's called family culture. It is the way people behave, the way people think, and the way people work together in the family. You know what I mean? For example, I lived overseas for 10 years. My family and I, we lived overseas. And being Singaporeans and living in a different country, among people with their own type of culture, we can continue to behave like Singaporeans in our own home or when we are with other Singaporeans. But when we are with other people, the locals, for example, we have to watch how we behave, and we have to be sensitive to their culture, and so that we do not do things that might offend them. You know what I mean? You see? So that's the thing here. Family culture means these are the practices you do at home, all right? And when you are consistent enough at home, then it becomes a family culture, okay? And hopefully this also spills over into other parts of their lives. So because eventually when you go out, for example, you go to the office, your office has a different culture, for example, slightly different. Of course, we have common things, like honesty and integrity and kindness, consideration. These are all quite common values that everybody holds on to. But how they are practiced in different places might also differ, right? So one of the things that we need to learn to be is also adaptable. So when you're at home, you might behave a certain way, you might have a certain culture that is unique to your family. And when you go to a different family or different workplace, there's a slightly different culture, and we have to adapt. You know what I mean? All right. So that's how it works. It doesn't mean that everybody has the same culture, which is not possible. Even in Singapore, we are multiracial, right? So there are different kinds of culture, but we try not to clash, but to kind of melt into one another.
And I think you mentioned a very good point there, talking about learning and knowing, understanding about other people's culture, which is not the same as our own. I think this is very key in our multi-racial, multicultural society, right? However, sometimes that it is not that easy because at home, uh, parents may want to guard some of their identity, some of their values, right? However, if done wrongly in a skewed way, right? Sometimes unintentionally, sometimes the words that we say about other cultures shape the minds and thoughts of our children, and they may become biased, even to extend racist, or even less understanding of other different people. So how then do we make our children be able to hold on to their own culture, be it traditional culture and identity, at the same time have good understanding and empathize with other people, differences and so on.
Well, I think the word you just used, empathy, is one of the keys to it. Empathy, is being able to understand and to feel what other people are feeling. But more than empathy is basically an appreciation. I think exposure helps a lot. When children are exposed to different types of people, different races, different nationalities, different food, different types of food, for example, um, they learn to appreciate diversity, rather than sticking to one and saying this is the best and all that. Well, we can have preferences, but at the same time, diversity is a very, very good, a very good thing. And I think if parents can expose their children and help children to appreciate diverse cultures and ways of thinking, and I think parents play a very important role. When When, for example, on the streets, you see certain people behaving certain way, I think it's important for parents, to process it with their kids and say, what do you think happened here? Why is this person behaving like this? What could it be? Without being judgmental, but just exploring the different, possibilities, so that the child builds up this repertoire of possibilities, so that, in their minds, in the child's minds, when something happens, they are able to retrieve all the different possibilities and then make a decision about which is most likely the real reason, you see. So that's part of also developing the thinking ability, the thinking skill of the child. On top of that is, of course, the appreciation for diversity, and just, just being open-minded to various points of view and ways of living.
Yeah, that's. I mean, you mentioned several good points about diversity, about understanding, but there's always that, what do you call that, tension, right, between what you want to retain as your own culture. Again, the problem may be that you see your culture as absolute, all right, as the best one, as the most right one, and once you see something different, okay, you have negative perception of it. Not only that, you treat people differently, okay, and I think that's not healthy, because once you have that kind of mindset, you are closed, you are not open to differences, not for the sake of differences. And I think we need to encourage our children to continue learning, to be humble, but at the same time rooted in certain values, right? So again, when we talk about values, where we start from, okay, how do you teach values? Because values are abstract, right? Values are beliefs. Values are hidden inside. If there's something, an example of a the iceberg, right? Iceberg, all right, only you can see the top, all right, maybe 20%, the 80% is all below. So there's a metaphor to show that identity, beliefs, attitudes, and so on are below, right? And values as well. And what you see actually is behavior. And so how do you ensure that those things are aligned not only correctly, but what is hidden actually is correct and right?
Well, when it comes to parenting, we only can do what is right. We can only do what our best, and it's very hard to ensure anything when it comes to parenting, because every child is different. The child has their own personalities, and also eventually they will have their own way of thinking. So when I talk about family culture, there are three very important pillars. The first one is also, as we have talked about, the values. So you have to decide what are your core values, and when I talk to people, sometimes they have a long list of values that they want to pass on to their kids. The question is, maybe you have too many, all right? What are the important ones? And the second pillar is norms. You need to create norms. Values are just desires, all right? These are the desired outcomes, all right? These are desirable qualities and traits, but they are just abstract, they are not yet converted and translated into tangible, actionable things that people can do on a daily basis. So values needs to be translated into norms, and norms is basically values in action. All right. So let me give you one example. There was this father I was talking to, and he wanted to teach his children consideration, to be considerate of others, to think of others, not just thinking of yourself. So in his home, when his kids were young, he began to, give instructions to his children. He says, every time you go to the kitchen to pour yourself a drink, all right, before you do that, go and ask everyone who is at home at that time, all right, whoever is at home. I mean, some people might not be at home, but whoever is at home, go to them and ask, I'm going to pour myself a drink. Can I get one for you? All right. So of course, when the kids were young, they might have forgotten, they might, not do it all the time, but he kept reminding them. There's no punishment if the child forgets, if the child didn't do it. All right. The father merely just reminds him, next time, remember to do that. Okay. Why? Because this is being considerate, and people are happy when you think about them and not just about yourself. And so he did it for quite a long time meaning a matter of couple of years and all that, and then eventually it became automatic, you see. So that's an example of how you take a value and you translate it into something that you can do on a daily basis. All right. So there are many core values that we would like to have, and we would like to teach our children. The question is, you need to pick those that you can translate into something that can be done on a daily basis, and yet it is meaningful. All right. And so that the more that it is being practiced, the more it becomes second nature to us.
Oh, amazing, Parkson. I cannot say it even clearer. I when I listen to you, it's very clear now. All right, values translated to action become norms. Norms become something that later practice over and over become automatic, and you don't have to remind over and over again anymore. So earlier we talk about how we parents sometimes need to keep on reminding. But there's an element of that must be done, but it must be done in the form of norms, action, consistency, and the ability for the child to observe and be able to carry out daily. And you also mentioned about not having too many values, right? As you said, important to identify the core values, all right? 3, maybe up to 5, okay? Because once those core values has been identified and anchored, probably some of the other values also come into play. I think, for example, the example that you gave is about having care for other people. All right. I mean, by asking whether they want a drink, it's about care, right? It's about empathy. It's about what if you are the one that is on the other side, offering help. This again, this is a related concept, right? Be more sensitive to other people. You can never know that the other person need more than you. Maybe you are doing something that at the moment you need, but other people need it more. And when you share with other people, and I believe what you love most, you will get more later. And I think that's another value that for me I hold to, and I intentionally keep on doing over and over again in my family, and it's something that I thought is very core to us.
Yeah. Remember in an earlier podcast episode, we were talking about authoritative parenting. And the first thing that an authoritative parent does is to set rules and consequences. First of all, you need to lay down some rules. And then, if the rules are violated, then what are the consequences? All these have to be set very clearly. It shouldn't be created on the go, and at the spur of the moment. So you need to think carefully. And one of the things I also said is that for a family where there are only two parents, I think the optimum number of rules that two parents can effectively and consistently enforce would be somewhere around 3 or 4. First of all, they need to remember it. They need to remember it specifically, very clearly. It's not good enough to remember it. Oh, it's something like that, and then when it comes to the consequences, oh, yeah, I think it's something like that. And then you keep changing. All right. So that's not good. Now, so a lot of parents will say, only 3 or 4 cannot. That's too little, and I said, well, there are many rules that we would like to have. All right, because we really want to, in a sense, we want to be able to control. I know I don't like to use that word, but actually that is exactly what parents are thinking about. How do I control my kids? How do I, control their behavior? And short of threatening them and punishing them or even rewarding them, parents use rules, don't do this, don't do that, and things like that. Well, there are many wish lists on our rule list, but even in Singapore, there are the written rules, and then there are also the unwritten rules. For example, in Singapore, everybody understands that, when you are in a public place, for example, in the bus or MRT train, you should not talk at the top of your, at the top of your lungs. You don't talk loudly. You talk normal voice, indoor voice, as we call it. All right. Okay. So this has been practiced for ages, as since I was born. I could remember this is how we behave in public. We don't shout, we don't talk on top of our lungs and things like that. But lo and behold, there's this group of people from another place, not Singaporeans, who came over, and they would talk very loudly, and then people would look at them and say, why do you do that? Don't you know we have this practice? This is not something we do in Singapore. Singaporeans don't behave like that in public, so clearly they are not Singaporeans. Now that is culture. That is culture. Culture is also, another way of putting it is unwritten rules. So in the written rules, if there's a rule that is written down and there's a consequence, a very clearly stated consequence, you break that rule, then you get punished, right? You face the consequences. But in culture, you might break the rule in that sense, unwritten rule, but you don't get punished. The most you get is that kind of look. If you talk loudly in the train, everybody will just look at you. It's just, what's wrong with you? Don't you know that is not the way to do it? All right. So same thing in a home, when you have, like going back to the example of that father trying to teach his children about consideration, So if the kids did not do it, whether they forgot or, they were in a hurry, they were too thirsty, they wanted to pour themselves a drink and just drink it, there are no consequences, all right? They just get a look from their father and says, why did you forget, Don't you remember? And things like that. Don't forget again next time, That's all. No punishment, no spanking, no withholding of privileges, and things like that. So that's the main thing that people need to understand, that this is how you enforce and reinforce culture. There shouldn't be any harsh punishment as a consequence, because it takes the joy out of it. All right, it takes the joy out of that.
Yeah, I think it's a very good point. I think what we do every day, if we don't enjoy it, we don't believe it, not only become stressful, but it becomes something that is not sustainable. I think the other thing is about when we are so used to our culture, right? Our family culture, our own country's culture, our people's culture. Then we start traveling, we start seeing people from other places, and they look different, they behave differently. Again, how we react, to that also very important. We have to understand that everyone comes from different contexts. There are reasons why that particular group of people speak loudly in public. I can only guess. They may be staying far away from each other, and they are not. It's a big country. They are not used to. I think having such a densely dense place like ours. We are one of the most highly dense populated country in the world. So again, when I travel also, we bring our culture to that people. In fact, I do work there. Actually, we don't realize, sometimes they look at us a bit weird. Why are we working so hard? Singaporeans are known to be work hard, non-stop. Workaholics. We thought it's natural, right? Because we do it every day. But we realize that we go there, people are more, enjoy life. They don't see things as what we do. They don't, for example, how they manage time. They call it elastic and flexible. And they are so used to it. For us to change that overnight or even forever is going to be difficult, because once you are in that context or in that situation, again, the ability to change out of the norm, to change out of the comfort zone is very difficult, right? So going back to maybe you want to share further out of
Yeah.
the norms, what would
Yeah,
be
I
the
was talking
next?
about the
Yeah,
three pillars. So
yeah,
I've talked about two already. The first is the values. You begin with the values that you want to teach to your children, and then translate them into actions, that can be practiced, that can be done on a daily basis, and that's called norms. Now, the third pillar is something that consists of rituals and traditions. So traditions are behaviors and actions that you engage in again and again. Now, it sounds like norms, but traditions may not have to take place daily. All right. So traditions, for example, how you celebrate certain holidays, traditions such as, maybe a weekly family meal. All right. That can be also a tradition, or maybe that would also fall into the category of a ritual. Okay. So something that may not be done on a daily basis, but it is still regular. So family meal on a Sunday night, for example, could be a ritual, could be a tradition, something that you keep doing and doing. Now, then why is this important? Because each of these things that you do on a regular basis, underneath it or behind it, there is meaning, there is a purpose, and there is also a value. All right. For example, a family meal. Why is it important? Well, because family is important. And then, what is family? If there is no communication, if there is no connection, if there is no, relationship, right? So over the family meal, is a time where family members can connect and communicate with one another. And it is through that relationships are built, you see. So that is an example of a ritual or a tradition. Holidays, Christmas, New Year, and whether it's Hari Raya or different holidays, how you celebrate it as a family or even as a race, or as a religion. Behind it, there's always a meaning, right? There's a purpose. There is a reason why you do certain things when you celebrate a holiday, isn't it? So nothing is done just for the fun of it. There
yeah,
is
yeah,
a
yeah.
meaning. Yeah, and
But
so it should
however,
be explained to the children.
as you mentioned, one becomes ritual, and because automatic, people get used to it and don't question the meaning. I mean, for example, the meaning of Hari Raya, right? Actually, there's a deep meaning, there's a religious meaning, there's also the cultural meaning. One of the things that we do, for example, is visiting each other, usually from the families, to the families, even friends. Yeah, it used to be like that very much. The Muslims, particularly the Malays in Singapore, in the region also, we treat the Hari Raya as 1 month. Actually, it's just one day. But why? Because we value family relationship. We value visiting each other. From there, we get to know better our families, our friends. However, with this COVID situation, things totally changed. I
Oh,
mean,
everything changed. Yeah.
last year it was worse, right? Circuit breaker is totally no visiting. This year, almost no. 2% only can visit, so most of us don't do any visiting. There's a lot of Hari Raya cookies wasted. But more importantly, I just want to mention this. Okay, there's always a meaning behind everything. So, for example, if you cannot visit the person physically, call, because it's about connecting, right? I
Yep,
mean,
that's
I
right.
also experienced this among my family. What they did to continue the value of the tradition, the ritual, we did Zoom Raya, right? We did
Okay.
on the eve of Hari Raya, or even the first day, or even the several days after that, we gather on Zoom. Okay, so again, although it's not perfect, but we continue the ritual in a different form, and then more importantly, get the value and meaning out of it still.
Yeah, what you just said is very important. You're able to do that. You created something, kind of a hybrid Zoom Raya, because you understood the reason, the purpose behind it. And you say, okay, what can we do? What's an alternative to visiting in person? What's an alternative to that? And yet we can accomplish and we can fulfill the objective. the purpose of it. So the danger with rituals and traditions is that people remember the practice, but they forget the purpose. Why are we doing this? Oh, because we've been doing it for years and centuries. This has been passed down from generation to generation. Now, confession, I want to confess. When I was young, I kind of grew to dislike Chinese New Year. I mean, Chinese New Year is the holiday for Chinese people, and I'm Chinese, okay?
And for
But
children, they get ang pao. Didn't you get ang
okay,
pao?
but you know why? Yes, I like the ang pao part, but you really had to work hard for the ang pao. In a sense, you had to go and visit different people. And Chinese New Year is usually a very hot day. Usually, most of the time it's sunny, and it hardly rains. You see. So when you're out there, going from one place to another, and my relatives all live very far apart. Some in Siglap, some in Whampoa, and wow, I tell you, you have to travel, and it's so hot. So it's kind of all right. The money is fun, but wow, I really have to work for it. So and all my relatives, they are either Teochew speaking or Hokkien or Cantonese, and unfortunately for me, even though my race is Teochew, that's what's stated in my birth certificate, but I don't think I even speak a word of Teochew. If I do, it's by accident. So I've grown up during my childhood. I basically speak English at home. So when I visit my relatives, I don't have any conversation. I mean, I can't speak to any of my relatives. You know what I mean? So it was boring. It was hot. It was, really tiring. So I grew to dislike Chinese New Year. And so when I became a father, I didn't pass on. I mean, we still do visit, but to the minimum, because I said, if we don't have to, let's not visit that person. So we visited just a very limited number of relatives. All right. And so my children did not learn from me, at least, the values behind this holiday of Chinese New Year. And I tell you, just before my eldest daughter got married, she just before her wedding, she said this to me, and I think she was scolding me in a way. She said, I didn't learn what it means to be Chinese from you. Wow, I tell you, I took it as a rebuke, and I said, oh dear, what have I done?
Okay, so I think, you're talking about ritual, right? So when the ritual becomes automatic, we seldom get the meaning out of it, and it lost its meaning. And I think it's very important that we remind our children at times that behind that ritual, especially when they have understood how to understand meaning of things, right? Or even keep on, even when they're young, right? Even they really don't understand, we keep on reminding them. For example, when we talk about visiting, I can imagine now that we Muslims or Malays in Singapore, even when Hari Raya, we try to cover as many houses as possible, as many people, and we can get pressured, you do how many house? 10 house, oh, I must do 11, it becomes, competition. But actually, then we realize that, hey, we are just visiting for the sake of visiting. We don't sit down at the place. We don't talk to the people. So frankly, my family, we step back and we don't follow the rituals of other people for the sake of following. What we did, you do 10, we respect, carry on. I tell my children, what we do is when we visit a person's house, we must understand that this is a time that we can connect. And usually we do it when not many people are there. Just imagine, because you have 10 people coming to your house, you are one host. How many people can you talk to? All right. So usually we visit them outside the peak hour, and they appreciate it. They will tell me that, hey, you know what, you're a bit different. When you come, we can really relax and talk, and we can know each other well. If you come earlier, like yesterday, I don't think I can entertain you. So when my children hear that, they become, at least there's a new learning that they did, that this ritual is not for the sake of visiting, but there's a meaning behind it.
Yeah, I think that's the important part. Yeah. Otherwise, children, they might find it a bit boring, like me. It's boring, it's tiring, and so the negative kind of outweighs the positive. And so in my mind, it's like, okay, the sooner I can do away with this and not continue this, the happier I will be. So yeah, so
Yeah, but then,
tradition and rituals and
yeah.
needs to be explained, and needs to be educated to the kids, so that they will continue it and it will perpetuate from one generation to another.
So what about the things that we say about things? I mean, how we say it. All right, when we describe certain things, and I think today when we talk about the issue of how men treat women, and there's a lot of movement out there about the women's rights and so on, and they start blaming men, for being biased, and it become a man versus woman thing, and there's no end to this. But the issue I want to bring up is, let's say, in the family, what would be the kind of uh, language symbols that when men use to their wives or to their female children that may influence the mindset of the male children that is will then be brought up in a certain way of perceiving women.
I think language is the key here, and I think as part of the family culture, the parents can also help the children understand that the language you use is very important, and language should not differ whether you're speaking to a male or a female. Whether you're speaking to, let's say, a brother or a sister. The language should not be different. I think you should say please and thank you to everybody. You should speak in a very polite tone, and speak slowly and speak softly, or at least in a normal volume, all right, without screaming and shouting and things like that. So those are the kind of practices that also make up the family culture, you see. And I guess the only difference is in terms of seniority. If you're speaking to someone who is your peer, your contemporary, you can speak just like friends. But if you're speaking to an elder, then the language can and should be different. The place that I was living was Kazakhstan, and in the Kazakh language, they have formal and informal. All right. For example, the word you. All right. There is even in Russian, yes. There is a formal version and an informal version. So if you're speaking to someone who is in authority, you would use the formal version. If you're speaking to an elder, you use the formal version. If you're speaking to a contemporary, your colleague, your friend, you use the informal. You speaking to a younger person, you use the informal. So that creates that mindfulness and awareness. Okay, I need to see you now. Who am I speaking with? And therefore, I will use that kind of language to that person. So I think this is good, and language is part of culture. All right. If you want to know the culture of a certain group of people, well, study their language. Understand their language, and it will tell you a lot about what is their mindset.
Yeah, I think we need also to be very careful, right? As you said, how we treat people. If we want them to see us as fair, as impartial, as holding the values of fairness and humanity and so on, we have to be discerning when we use certain words. Again, all this becomes culture, right? I know. I mean, for example, all of us have gone through NS. The words that we use sometimes in during the service, all right, is very rough. Okay, then we, because among men you can be rough. Okay, but then we say that maybe with women we must be softer. Okay, but again, that also means that are we saying that women are soft? Naturally, they are, but sometimes we try to differentiate. Then it goes into, for example, the roles of men and women. Although we are built differently, but what I think when it comes to the house, for example, in the house. For example, housework. It shouldn't be because in the past, our previous generation, due to economic and cultural differences, they see housework as for women, and men go out and earn money, right? And today, if we have that mindset, it's a big problem, and we should use the same language, all right, that are being used before. It becomes very incongruent to the development of today, and that's why I think there's a lot of pushback or challenge from the women, actually those women group who have strong agenda, and men become very defensive. And I think this will be another topic that you will speak on. But again, I think it's very important. It comes from the home, right? These are culture, norms, as you said, rituals, traditions that become automatic. If you don't change it right from the home, then it's going to be quite difficult if you want to say that the society will change, overnight.
Yeah, I can think of one phrase, that sticks in the minds, stick in our minds, and it communicates a lot. And unfortunately, it might not send the right message. And that is, these women, or you women, you women. So we put all women into one bag, one category, and says, and we kind of generalize and stereotype. Oh, women are like that. And when our kids listen to that and hear that, and it's repeated again and again, without even teaching them, they kind of get it. Oh, okay, women are like that, and doesn't matter who, as long as this person is a woman, you can expect the woman to be like that. So that's stereotyping, that's generalizing, and that's unfortunately, like I said, it does not send the right signal. Right message. So we need to avoid things like that. Women should not say, you men, and men should not say, you women, because that is, that creates more problems.
Yeah, that brings to the word respect, right? I think this is something that the whole world is talking about. Sometimes due to different culture, beliefs, systems, the lack of respect to each other. And sometimes it starts from the home. You don't respect your wife, you don't respect your children, you don't respect other people's differences. Even in the house, there are differences. Various children have different strengths, different weaknesses, and to put everyone in basket, it just switch off the other person's mind to you. The next thing you say, they will not hear, because you treat me like another person. I'm unique. I'm different from other people. When you treat me like him or her, then I'm nobody, and everyone doesn't want to be a nobody. All right? Yeah. Okay, Paksan, I think it's a really good conversation.
Yes, it has been. Very interesting subject, actually.
Yeah, despite COVID and despite enhanced heightened alert, we are still continuing. And we hope we can continue again one day, face to face, physically at the studio. Not like this.
That's right.
But make do.
That freezing little room.
All right. So let's
Okay.
end this time for now. Till next time. Thank you, everyone, for
bye.
listening. Bye bye.